everybody, happy Halloween from the Way Cool Cooking School. Chef Mary here, and we are super excited to share with you our ooh so spooky and delicious Nailed It Halloween challenge. And so in your kit this week, you have everything you need to make this adorable unicorn/witch cake. And so what I want to do really quickly is kind of go over the instructions on how to make the cake and all the fun stuff that came in your kit so that we can decorate this cake together here in a couple minutes. All right, so in your kit, you've got 2 containers of green frosting ready to go for your unicorn. We've got purple, we've got black, we've got orange. And so that's what we're gonna use to make the unicorn and decorate the unicorn. And then you've got all of these fun little bags in a kit with all of the other decorations like spooky Halloween sprinkles, orange, green, and black fondant to make the hat and to make the unicorn face and also to make the little accessories that are on the cake. You also have a very small bag of powdered sugar, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then you also have some food coloring in your kit. You either have a drop food coloring or you have a gel food coloring in your kit, and that's gonna help you decorate and color your cake batter. We've got a bottle of vegetable oil, some cake mix, and some cake pans. In your kit, you either received 2 large cake pans or you received 4 little slightly smaller cake pans. And so the cake pans, if you are doing and you receive the 2 cake pans, you're gonna make this cake in batches. And so you're gonna make the orange layers first and then come back and make the purple layers after you use them. Just give them a quick wipe out and pour the rest of the batter in. And then if you receive the 4 aluminum cake pans, you can make all 4 layers at one time. This is a 4-layer cake, y'all. And so you are nailing 4 layers of Halloween fun in this mix. A couple other things I wanted to talk about as you get ready to bake your cake here today is to remember to follow the directions in your kit and hope that you can follow along and nail how to bake this cake. There are directions listed for both different styles of pans. There's also directions listed on how to use the food coloring depending on what style of food coloring you received. Once you have your cake batter done and your purple and your orange cakes out of the oven and cool, it is gonna be time to decorate. So I've got some cakes in the oven right now. I'm gonna wait and grab them out and get them ready to go. And I'm gonna show you how to decorate this awesome unicorn witch. Okay, our cakes are out of the oven. I've got 2 layers of purple and 2 layers of orange, completely cooled, ready to go and ready to decorate. And so the first thing that I'm gonna do is I wanna make sure that these cakes, when they lay out inside of here, so this is kind of a nailed it tip for you, to make sure that your cake stands up nice and tall and is nice and level on the top. Because cakes get a little bit of a dome on top of them, you can see here, I'm gonna take and I'm just gonna saw off the top of that cake. And so I'm just gonna lay it right on top of my cake board here, and I'm gonna take and I'm gonna cut off, and I'm just using a large knife here, and I wanna give it a nice level top. The other fun part about this is that when you take the extra cake off, if you save it, you can take and crumble it up and add it in with your extra frosting, and then you can make cake pops with it. All right, so I've got that all taken care of, so I have a nice flat surface now, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do that with all 4 layers of the cake to make sure that they are nice and flat. Now this is a special cake knife that is a large knife that has a little saw blade on it, so it's easy to cut through the cake. If you do not have one of these, you can use like a bread knife or anything out of your knife drawer that's got teeth on it, so it's easy to saw through the cake. And remember, if you've never used a knife this big before or need a large knife, this is where you ask your grown-up for help in your kitchen so that they can help you cut and level off those cakes. All right, I'm gonna get them all cut up and then we'll be back and I will show you how to frost the first layers. Okay, you guys, I've got all 4 layers of my cake cut down so they're nice and flat so that we'll get a nice, tall, flat cake when we're decorating here today. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and we're gonna layer the cake and we're gonna add the inside layers. And so this is where we're going to use really as little of this as possible because I wanna save as much green frosting for the outside of my cake as I can. And so really we're just gonna put this down as like a layer of glue in between the layers. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna grab my cake spatula. We got a couple different sizes here, and I like the little guys because I think that's because I learned how to frost with a butter knife in our kitchen, and so I'm just more comfortable with the little one. But the big one is great too, and some people like that. I'm just stirring up this frosting so that I know it's nice and soft and spreadable. And then I'm gonna try to only use about half of this container for all 4 of these layers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab about a blob that is about 2 to 3 tablespoons, and I'm gonna blob that in the middle of the cake. And then I'm gonna take my cake spatula, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna spread it around. So this was one of the hardest things I had to learn when I was learning how to cake decorate, because I wanted to just like do it really, really fast and spread it all over the place. And really it's all about really gentle fingers, and you're kind of just gently pushing the frosting around. And then I turn the cake board a little bit so that I know that I've got the layer in there. There we go. So I got my first purple layer down, just like it shows in your picture. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the first orange layer. So I'm gonna take our flat orange layer cake, I'm gonna center it, I'm gonna make sure that the sides line up really, really nice and straight, because that's much harder to correct later. And then I'm gonna give it a little push on top so that that glue, that green frosting in the middle sticks like glue. And then I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did before. I'm gonna take about 3 tablespoons of frosting, blob it in the middle, and then use my spatula to go ahead and spread this all over the place. All right, I'm gonna continue to do that with the next 2 layers, and then we're gonna move on and we are going to frost the outside of the cake. Oh wow, this cake is so tall. I've got all 4 layers decorated and frosting in between. I'm kind of just straightening it up one more time, making sure the sides are nice and straight. Making sure it's on the center of my cake board now, because once I start frosting the outside, that is gonna be much, much harder to do. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to frost the cake. Now, there are lots of methods on how to frost and crumb coat a cake on the internet. If you've got a little extra time and your cakes are cool but kind of soft, at this stage, I would recommend putting them in the freezer like this for about 10 minutes, and that's gonna give you a nice firm base to decorate with. The other thing is that some people like to start on the sides of their cake and then frost the top. Some people like to frost the top first and frost the sides. I really kind of like to put some frosting on the top and get a base layer on the top, and then I work my way around the sides of the cake as I'm frosting. Again, lots of different ways to do this that you can see, but this is my favorite way, as I've conserved half of this container, and then I've got this whole container to go to cover this whole gigantic 4-layer cake. And so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna just start on the top, and I'm gonna take, and this is where we put little layers in between the cakes. This is where we wanna put a lot of frosting, because it's actually easier to push a big blob of frosting around a cake, much easier than it is a small blob. So I'm putting on, ooh, this looks like Halloween Ghostbuster slime. I love it. And I'm gonna take the whole half of the container that's left in my first container of green frosting, and I'm gonna plop that on top of the cake. And then I'm gonna use the same technique I used before, and I'm gonna gently start pushing, not pushing all the way down to the cake, but just pushing on the top there to get the top covered. And then I'm constantly turning my cake. And as you can see, the frosting is gently starting to fall over the edge of the cake. And that is okay, because we want frosting on the sides of our cake too. That's why I like to do the top first to get the top layer going. All right, and kind of level that out just a little bit. I use big swooping motions, kind of like a windshield wiper on a car, to get that nice and smooth as I can right away. And then what I'm gonna do is on the sides here, you can see there's a little bit over the edge. When you go to decorate the sides of a cake, you really don't want to push down into the cake, because we don't want to grab all of those crumbs to get into our frosting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to just gently wiggle, and it's almost like I'm going on top of the frosting and just gently spreading that around, just like this. And I kind of just go to where the edge of the frosting is here, you can see on this side, and then I don't push it onto the plain cake. So I only want to push my spatula where there's already frosting on the cake, and it kind of pushes it toward where there's no frosting on the cake. And so I'm gonna do that right away and get that going around the whole edge of the cake. And then when I run out of this little bit of extra frosting here on top, that's when I'm gonna dip into the second container of frosting and start adding more frosting to the cake. And again, it's better to have more frosting on the cake and have to take frosting off than to do it the other way. Very, very gentle here as I'm frosting the cake, because I don't want to get any crumbs. And the easiest way to do that is to go nice and slow and go very, very gently with your spatula.
And this works if you have a big spatula or a little spatula. And it helps that my cake is really, really nice and cold because the frosting is starting to firm up onto the cake as I'm pushing it around. And I've got that done. So now we're gonna go down to the next layer. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna open up my frosting container and I'm gonna give it a little stir. And this time, instead of dumping half of the frosting on the side of the cake, which is really kind of impossible to do, I'm gonna take my cake here and I'm gonna move it around to the least frosted side so you guys can see what's gonna happen. I'm gonna grab that 3 tablespoons size scoop on top there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay it on the cake and I'm gonna wiggle it back and forth just like this. Now I'm doing it opposite so you guys can see what's going on. You of course can do this in front of you so it's a little bit easier, but I want you to be able to see what's going on with the cake as we're frosting it. Then I'm gonna grab another blob of frosting and I'm gonna connect those two. So it's kind of like working in patches. I'm gonna connect the patches of frosting on the cake so that we can, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna smooth it. I wanna make sure that there's enough frosting around the cake first, and then I'm gonna connect them and connect the layers of frosting. So we're gonna continue to do that. 3 tablespoon to 4 tablespoon type scoops. I'm frosting around the layers here. And you can see with my little spatula that I love, I'm not getting even all the way down to the bottom. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna add more frosting to the bottom. And if you've done this before, if you are like a cake crumb cake pro, by all means, this is just one way to do things. I think the funnest part about cake decorating is kind of discovering which way that works best for you and how you like to frost cakes and decorate cakes. So this is just my way that I was taught and how I like to do this. All right, so we've got that on there. And I've got around the top layer here. So now I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna grab frosting for the bottom layer of the cake. And I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna add the frosting to the bottom layer of the cake and kind of use my windshield wiper. And I'm gonna throw that frosting on all the way around the cake. So let me get this whole cake base layer done and then I will show you how to smooth out the cake. Okay, we've got our cake completely what I consider like rough coated with the frosting. It's got a thick layer of frosting all around the edges here and it's pretty lumpy and bumpy. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take my spatula and I'm gonna slide it across the cake. And I'm gonna go as far as I possibly can around the cake and then gently kind of swipe off the cake so that it smooths it out. So I'm gonna show you again and I'm gonna go this way so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm taking and I'm gently, again, never going all the way down into the cake, smoothing this around the cake. And then when I get to where I can't really kind of push anymore, I don't lift up, I swipe out from the cake. And that makes it so that it stays smooth. Because if you pull straight directly out from the cake, you're gonna pull all of the frosting and some of the crumbs with it as well. So you wanna keep this whole thing covered as you're smoothing and as you're frosting around the edges. The other thing is I've got my little container here so I can remove any excess frosting from my spatula before I go back in and you're really taking a thin layer of frosting off of the cake as you're doing this. And then I'm gonna use this kind of backhanded technique to do this. So I can show you, and we're gonna go around, and we're gonna do this all the way around the cake, and we're gonna gently smooth out the sides of the cake here. I'm taking off any extra frosting that I don't need as I go in. I'm also gonna save this frosting because sometimes, no matter how many times you do this, you're gonna hit a spot where you maybe didn't get quite as thick of frosting the first time around, and you're gonna have to put a little bit of frosting back on the cake. And so when I need that, I've got that frosting right there in that container ready to go. And then we're gonna go around. And I always am kind of like scoping out what side do I want the front of my cake to be. So I usually choose the side that I think I got the smoothest, and that's where we're gonna put our little unicorn face when we go to decorate with our fondant here after we get our cake all frosted and set up. All right, now depending on how much time you have to do this, once you get your cake like 90% of the way smooth, the way that you like it, another kind of fun cake decorating hack is to take and reset your frosting in your cake in the freezer again for like another 5 to 10 minutes. And what that does is it allows the frosting to be nice and firm. And then you can take your cake spatula and grab a hot, damp towel. So hot water, wrung it out really, really tight, And then you're gonna take, and what that does is it not only does it clean off your spatula, but it also kind of warms it up a little bit so that you can go back in and give your cake a really, really, really nice smooth edge around all of the edges of the cake. All right, we're gonna finish up decorating here, and then we're gonna get into the fondant, the fun part, it's all fun, but the fondant's really, really fun because it's kind of like playing with Play-Doh, and show you guys how to make the unicorn face, and then we're gonna finish up with our unicorn hair and the topper. All right, let me frost this all up and make it nice and smooth, and then we will go ahead and we'll start playing with some fondant.
All right, you guys. I had let our cake set up in the freezer so I could get a really, really nice smooth edge on it. So it's gonna be easy to decorate and add our fondant to it. And so now we're gonna show you how to make the little fashion accessories for your Nailed It cake. We've got a bag of black fondant, a little bag of orange fondant, which is gonna be our little unicorn bow. And then we've also got a container of green fondant. And the green fondant is gonna be your unicorn ears. So I'm gonna take, and the first thing I'm gonna do is this fondant is really, really, it's kind of like Play-Doh, but you know when Play-Doh kind of gets hard and when it gets cold. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna warm up these bags just in my hands a little bit before I even touch it. Anytime that you're playing with fondant, you wanna make sure that you have a very, very clean, dry surface. I'm using a piece of parchment paper here just because it's easier for you guys to see on the white what we're doing. If you have extra parchment paper, you can do that too. Or you can do this directly on the countertop. Now, in your kit, you've got this little kind of satchel of little baggie of powdered sugar here. And this is to be used the way that you use flour when you roll out like sugar cookie dough. But because this fondant is so firm, we probably aren't gonna need to use this at all as long as we've got clean and dry hands. If you notice that the fondant starts to feel sticky at all, that's when you wanna take a little bit of your powdered sugar out and just put it on, I like to just take a little tiny bit and put it on the counter or the work surface that I'm working on so that if I need to dip anything into the powdered sugar, I can dip the stuff into the powdered sugar. And I have very, very hot hands. And so my fondant fingers warm up fondant pretty fast. So if you have really, really warm fingers, you're gonna probably need to have that. The other thing I like to have on hand is I like to have a towel on hand, like a damp towel, not wet, but a damp towel, and then a hand towel to dry my hands with too. So I'm set up so I don't get frustrated when I have fun with the fondant. All right, let's get started. Let's make some unicorn ears. Okay, what we're gonna do here first, and these are kind of your tips. Of course, this is a Nailed It cake. You can make it however you want and however you imagine unicorn ears could be. But this is kind of a cool thing. So when I'm playing and shaping with clay or fondant or marshmallow fondant or chocolate or modeling chocolate, a lot of times, a lot of these shapes are easiest if you start with just a simple round ball of fondant right there. And so I'm gonna take and I'm gonna do that. And why I like to do that is because it makes it easy to divide in half. So I'm gonna make 2 ears and I want them to be about the same size. So if I roll it into a circle, then I can take and I can divide it into half really, really easily. And I've got 2 little green circles right there. The other thing is I like to think about like, what kind of shape is it really? And the ear, because it's kind of round and like this, like a little top of a diamond and with a flat bottom. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna give it a little kind of like almost like a teardrop shape in my fingers by pinching the top of it like this, and then just kind of rolling the bottom here so that we have a little teardrop shape. And then what I'm gonna do to that teardrop, so I'm gonna set it on my work surface and I'm gonna start to gently start flattening it out so that it becomes a flattened ear. And so it turns into a bigger teardrop shape. Okay, I got my teardrop the way I like it. The other thing to remember is that because we want these to stick straight up onto the cake, I do not want them too thin. And so this is still, if we are measuring, about 1/4 of an inch thick. You can see there, it's still pretty thick. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna flatten the bottom of my teardrop. So I'm just gonna hold it from both sides and I'm gonna take and I'm gonna flatten it right on my work surface there, and it stands up all by itself. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna just wrap it around my little finger here and turn it into my little round ear. All right, and we're gonna do the exactly same thing with the other one. We're gonna pinch the top and turn it into our round teardrop shape.
flatten it out so it's the same size as our other one. Okay, we got the teardrop. Then we're gonna take and we're gonna smash the bottom flat, and then I'm gonna just wrap it around my finger and I'm gonna turn it. And now I have 2 little unicorn ears ready to go on my cake, and I'm gonna set those off to the side. You do not need to wrap them up after you set them off to the side, because we actually kind of want them to get hard so that they'll stand up on our cake. I am setting them up upright though, so we've got them ready to go. And they are gonna be all set for when we are ready to do our next thing, which is, we gotta make a bow. We gotta make a bow for our unicorn, because not just I have this cool hat, your unicorn is gonna have a cool unicorn horn too. And so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our orange frosting and we are going, or fondant, and we're gonna take, and I'm gonna show you how to make the unicorn bow that goes on the front of this. So you've got a bow, and then you've got a little ribbon that wraps around the front of your hat, unicorn horn / hat. And so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take my dough and kind of roll it into a little log shape. Again, I always kind of start with that same roundish shape, and then I'm gonna shape it into a little tiny log piece, and then I'm gonna take 1/3 of it off. And so the easiest way for me to do that is kind of just like divide it into like 3 little peas here. So I've got 1 little, 2 little, 3 little balls here. There we go, all about exactly the same size. And I'm gonna take and kind of take the first one then, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flatten it back out into that log again, and I'm just gonna keep flattening it. And this is the one, as I'm flattening it, I'm kind of pulling it gently with my fingers. And I have not used any powdered sugar yet because I wanna keep this nice and soft so that it's easy to stretch and easy to use. I'm gonna move it down to my paper, and I'm gonna start to kind of pinch it and flatten it out. All right, and this is what's gonna become the ribbon that wraps around the hat, kind of like my purple one is right now. We're gonna take and I'm gonna wrap it around. I'm pinching it so it gets longer, and then I'm using my finger to flatten it so that it looks more like a flat ribbon to go around the front of that too. So this is about 5 inches long. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna move that off to the side because I don't need that right now. Then I'm gonna take and we are going to make the little side parts of the bow like this. And those are like little triangles. So I'm gonna grab this, I'm gonna divide it in 2, okay? And then just like we did kind of with the ear, instead of making a teardrop, I'm gonna make a little triangle shape that we're gonna flatten out into the sides of that bow. All right. And pinching as I go. And again, I'm only making it probably about that same thickness as the ribbon and as we did with the unicorn ears. That's how thick I'm making it right there. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing to the other one. I'm kind of flattening it out and keeping it that triangle shape. But instead of flattening the bottoms like we did with the unicorn ears, I'm gonna take and I'm actually gonna roll it on here so that I get a nice rounded bow for the sides of the bow. Okay, so I've got my 2 little sides of the bow ready to go. I'm gonna take and I'm just gonna pinch them together in the center and kind of round them out again. So this is what we have so far, our 2 little sides of the bow. And then we're gonna take that last piece of fondant that we have, and we're gonna take and I'm gonna grab just like half of this. I don't need all this. We're gonna save that for later. I'm gonna grab half of it. I'm gonna start with that same shape. I start with the rounded ball every time. And I'm gonna take this, and now I'm gonna take my fingers and I'm kind of just pinching gently, gently, gently. And we're gonna make a thin little rectangle. And this is what we're gonna wrap around the center of our bow. So I've got our rectangle just like this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna place it on the middle of our bow and wrap it around that center part that we pinched already. And that's gonna stick all together as you kind of use your heat to smush it together. There we go. And then I kind of just like play with it a little bit and get it to the point where I like it. I'm gonna give a little wrinkle maybe in the bow so it looks a little bit like a little bit more realistic. And then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna set that for now right in the center of my ribbon that we're gonna use for our unicorn horn here in a second. So let me show you. This is our bow right here. We've got our cute little bow ready to go. And then the last thing we need is our black fondant. And so what we're gonna do here for this one is we're gonna take our fondant, and this is like the longest part of this whole process is playing with this fondant and getting this fondant ready to go. And so this, if it feels a little sticky, that's where you take just your fingertips and put it in the powdered sugar so that it doesn't stick. All right, that rounded shape, we're gonna start again. This one, we're gonna take just the size of a small little round marble, and that's gonna become the inside of our unicorn ears. And so as you can see here, I've got just like a little small piece. I'm gonna set that off this side. The rest of this, we are turning into a gigantic coil, like a gigantic snake of black fondant. And that's what we're gonna use to turn into the top of our unicorn head. All right, so I got this. All right, and then I'm gonna take, when I get about this long, I'm gonna take about 1 inch off of it, and this part, I'm gonna roll into a ball. And then we're gonna take, and this is about the size of like as round as a quarter. And we're gonna take that and I'm gonna flatten it out. And I'm gonna use my little pinchers here. And we're gonna flatten this out and make it as big as we can. And that's gonna become the base of your unicorn horn that the rest of this coil is gonna sit on top of. And I'm trying to be careful so that I don't get too much powdered sugar on one side of it. So I've got kind of powdered sugar on the back side of it that it's helping my fingers so they don't stick. And I'm just gonna take and I'm gonna flatten it out, and that becomes the brim of your witch's hat and unicorn horn. So I've got that set over there. And then we're gonna take and I'm just gonna roll this into a gigantic coil so that we can turn that into our unicorn hat. Okay, you guys, I have a nice thin coil of our black fondant here, and what I've started doing is I've just rolled it into started my circle using my brim of my hat as my guide, and so I made a circle with the coil the size of the center of that. Now, as you're doing this, if your coil breaks, it's not a big deal. Don't panic. You don't need to start over because you can just stick it together and let it go that way. All right, I think that the easiest way for me to kind of show you how to do this here, so I'm gonna kind of unravel it and show you again. All right, so I made a ring, a circle, like this, a little bit smaller than the inside of my hat. And that's the part that's gonna be like my base that everything else is gonna go on top of. And so I'm gonna take it off the brim just so you guys can see, I got the little circle there. Then what you're gonna do with your coil is you're gonna go in and you're gonna add layers on top of that, but slightly smaller than the layer underneath of it. And it's gonna grow up the coil. And as I'm doing this, I'm pinching them together from the inside of the coil. Just like that, there we go. And I'm gonna keep going here until I run out of coil, basically. And then when I get to the top, because the circles are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, I'm getting to the point here where I basically have my cone shape right here. And then I'm gonna take this top part and I'm just gonna twirl it on top of itself. And then I'm gonna twirl the top up into a point to make the top of my witch's hat. And I've got a little bit of powdered sugar on my fingers because again, my hands get really, really warm really, really fast. And so my fondant always gets really sticky really, really fast. But if you do not have really, really warm hands, you can probably play with this without any powdered sugar whatsoever. So now I've got my little witch's hat right here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take and we're gonna set it on top of the brim of my hat. And then I'm gonna add my bow to the hat. Now, if you're having trouble at any point with this sticking, what you can do is take just a little tiny bit of water, just a drip of water, and you can take and you can just kind of touch it very gently, and the water kind of acts like glue to make the fondant stick to each other. And that is true also if you have a little bit of extra powdered sugar that you need to, like, you don't want it to look like powdered sugar. You can take just a little paintbrush or your finger and just dab at that. And now we're gonna take, and I'm gonna try to get this on my hand here and show you our witch's hat. So I've got a cute little bow, and then I've got my witch's hat unicorn horn that stands straight up, and that's what we're gonna place on top of our cake that we're gonna add our frosting around. Okay, This fondant segment is for sure one of the longest segments of getting all these cake stuff together, and it does take some time. It does take a little bit of patience. And so don't get frustrated with it, have fun with it, and create that as walking it through. The one little last thing that we're gonna do here is we have to make our eyes, and we have to make the inside of the ears. So that little extra back piece of fondant that we had, I'm gonna divide it into two again, take one of the halves, divide that into two, and smush that flat into little baby diamond shapes, little kind of round diamond shapes. And that's what's gonna go inside of the ears to make the inside of the ear shape there. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the other one, flatten it and then shape it and stick it to the inside of my unicorn ear. So now we've got our unicorn ears and we've got our unicorn hat. And then I'm gonna take this other piece and I'm gonna divide that into two, and this is what we're gonna roll into the eyes of our unicorn. And so I'm gonna take and roll it in between my fingers until it's very, very nice and thin, even thinner than what we use for the top of our hat. And then what I like to do is in my hand is I kind of, when I roll this, I kind of roll and pinch the edges of it so they're thinner than the center of it. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decide which side I want to be the inside part of the eye and then the outside part, because they're kind of winking. And the inside part I'm gonna kind of smush flat. And then the outside part I'm gonna make even thinner to turn into the little eyelashes that are on the outside part. And so you can see it because it kind of sits on my finger there. We've got the inside part and then the outside part. And then I'm gonna set that down and kind of just gently flatten it a little bit so that it kind of gives that shape. And then I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the other one so that we have our two eyes ready to go. And you can pull even littler pieces if you want to add extra. They'll give your unicorn a little extra and give her some extra little eyelashes or him little eyelashes on the edges there. All right, so now I've got the eyes, I've got the hat and the ears, and the fondant is done. And so now all we get to do is we gotta put this all on the cake and make this whole cake come together. Okay, you guys, it's finally time to put all of this wonderful stuff we've learned together and make our unicorn witch cake come alive. All right, so I've got all my fondant pieces laid out. I've got my piping bag ready to go. And I've chosen what side of the cake I want to be the front of my cake. And so that is what I'm gonna do first. You can decorate this cake however you like. It is yours to nail however you want to. But what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna show you how to do kind of the curls on the front of the cake. I'm at pretty much almost eye level with this cake so I can see what's going on. And I'm gonna take and I'm gonna give this unicorn some fringe. I'm gonna give her a little bit of bangs going on here. And I'm gonna do that by taking the piping bag, and as I'm piping it, I'm gonna hover right over the cake, not into the cake. You don't wanna stab the cake, right over the cake. And I'm gonna start in the center and I'm gonna do a circle. And then when I get to the edge of the circle, I stop squeezing and I lift up. All right, so I'm gonna show you kind of what that looks like here. And I'm gonna start right in the center here and give it, and this is gonna be probably about a 2-inch circle. Give it a circle, I get to the top of the circle, and then I'm just gonna stop, and that is one rosette. So this tells me right away that this is gonna be the center front of my cake, and then I'm gonna build the whole rest of my cake around that point. So I'm gonna take the rest of this then, and again, I'm starting in the center, and I'm gonna give 2 smaller little rosettes around the sides, like that, and get that ready to go. And so those are gonna be the front bang pieces, the French pieces of the front here. And that's also gonna tell me where I'm gonna lift and set up my little hat when I'm ready to put my hat on. So from here, you're gonna take your purple frosting, and you're gonna take, and we're gonna start to kind of add rosettes wherever we want to with all 3 colors. And so we also have a piping bag with a small star tip that is orange. And on that, it looks like she's got a little bit of flair here. So I'm gonna add just a little twirl of frosting right here. And then I'm gonna add a little twirl of orange frosting right here. And anytime that you're kind of decorating cakes, it's really kind of important to remember a couple things to make your cakes look just awesome. And that is using symmetry, but also using odd numbers. So you see like she's got 3 little poofs of unicorn hair in the front, but I'm also kind of adjusting things on either side of the cake so it's pretty balanced. And then what I'm gonna do right away is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna set my little unicorn ears in, just like this. And I'm gonna carefully lift up my witches / unicorn horn and put that right on the top, because I'm probably gonna wanna add some, little poofs of frosting here, and that's gonna help keep it in place. So I'm adding 1 to each side of the ears, and I'm gonna start to kind of set up where I want the mane to go, which is gonna go back around and around the cake. And at this point, you just gotta get creative. Finally, I'm gonna go back in with the black frosting, and that's where I'm just gonna give it like little tiny poofs of black for the accents around it before I add on my unicorn flare, my sprinkles. Okay, so let me get the mane going here so you guys can see what's going on, and then we will add the finishing touches. Okay, you guys, we have been just completely so excited, and I've got frosting all over the cake as the mane of the cake. And so what started out as just bangs for my unicorn has now turned into a full mane all the way around, and it ends up in the front. So our unicorn's got like this beautiful hair that just like flows all the way around her cake here. And I use the black, it's just like an accent a little bit around the cake. So now we've got all this ready to go. And so now it's time to add the front face of the cake. And so I'm going to take and I'm going to turn my cake so I can see what I'm doing here too, and show you what we've got going on. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take and we're gonna add our little eyes right onto the front of our unicorn, and we will be done. So what I like to do is, since we got a little bag of black frosting here too, I'm going to squeeze just the tiniest little bit of black frosting on, and I'm gonna get down at unicorn eye level, and we're gonna take and I'm gonna place that first eye where I want it on the cake so that it sets in there. And then I'm gonna do exactly the same thing with the other one. And again, I'm just barely using whatever little tiny bit of black frosting there is. And I'm gonna take and I'm gonna add the other one on there too, and try to get that at that first press, because that's gonna be the hardest thing to lift up and set back down, are gonna be our little eyelashes. Okay, we have done it. There she is, our super adorbs unicorn witch cake, all decorated, ready to enjoy for Halloween with family and friends. I hope you guys had and enjoyed making this cake as much as we did here today and this week. We got a cool kit, Mexican Fiesta coming up next week for our kid. We're gonna be making some churros with chocolate dipping sauce and enchiladas and some sweet corn tamales too. So happy Halloween, y'all, from everyone here at the Way Cool Cooking School. We hope that you guys have a spooktacular time, and thank you so much for baking and cooking with us.